Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Dr. Ernesto Che Guevara is the man of our era, a revolutionary internationalist. He began life as a physician, healing the sick, curing the lame, shaking hands with lepers.
Che did explain that from the start, all revolutionaries begin from feelings of love. He loved humanity and wanted to help set it free from the sicknesses of oppression, poverty, and hopelessness.
His daughter, Dr. Aleida Guevara, is also a revolutionary physician, and we spoke to her, alas, unfortunately, just before the seismic change in relations between Cuba and the United States. We talked to Dr. Guevara in London about Cuba, her life, her parents, and her children's 3 grandfathers. Dr. Aleida, you are a medical physician. Cuba is fantastically famous for its biomedical industry and its health system, which has become admired around the world, indeed has traveled all around the world. How did Cuba get to be so good at healthcare?
From the beginning of the revolution, our head commander, Fidel Castro, was always extremely worried by the health of its people. But from the very beginning, we realized that it was much easier to prevent an illness instead of having to cure it. Therefore, from the start, we had a public health system fully free for everyone, but on top of that, we had this focus on prevention, and together with this, education of the people, because you cannot convince someone of the need of doing some things differently if that person doesn't have a certain level of education. So the medicine in Cuba, from the very beginning, had to do with the practice of solidarity. And this is what we started to show to our people, and this is how we were educated from the very start. And this reached a point where at the beginning of the revolution, a lot of Cuban doctors went to the United States. We had very few left, so we started training this revolutionary doctor that didn't have a private consultation. Everything is for the state, everything is for the people. But on top of that, in 1963, so we have the revolution in 59, and in 63, we have the revolution in Algeria, where they needed a lot of doctors. And this is the first international brigade of doctors. Many doctors went to Algeria. We didn't have a lot, but we wanted to share the very little that we have. And this is how we started to grow as a people.
And as an instrument of solidarity, medicine has proved tremendously successful. In the poor barrios in Venezuela, for example, where most of the people, for most of the time, could never have dreamt of having a doctor. There are Cuban doctors there in the poorest areas performing miracles. The operation to cure cataract problems amongst people. This has operated and given sight to so many people. Tell us about that.
Bueno, es que a través del ALBA, es decir, cuando
with ALBA, in the ALBA Treaty, when we started to wake up as a continent, not just as a people, but as a continent, as a unity of different people. Venezuela changed its destiny with the arrival of President Chavez, and they needed a lot of help at that time. And the very beginning, the first thing to do is to educate, because for people to be free, it has to be educated. When we started with this campaign, we realized that there were some people who wouldn't come near us. They didn't want to learn how to read and write. And why not? Because they couldn't see. So they were ashamed in a way. And when we started to diagnose this problem, we could see that the problem was only cataracts. It's a very simple surgery. It takes a few minutes only. So Fidel Castro, the commander-in-chief decided that it wouldn't only be a campaign to teach people how to read and write, but we also needed to carry out these surgeries to give people their sight back and for them to be ready to choose. If they wanted to learn how to read and write, they would be able to, and not because of this physical barrier. So in that sense, we started with this kind of surgeries, and the first patients who were given their sight back, there was a very old man who said, "This is a miracle." And then we went from Latin America to Africa and the Middle East. But the problem that we've seen, and we've seen it with the medical colleges in these countries, sometimes they don't want to do it. In Argentina, for instance, they don't let us work in their territory. No Cuban doctor can work there. 48,000 Argentinians have been had the surgery in the border with Bolivia, between Argentina and Bolivia. We had two hospitals there. And the solidarity gets to these patients that receive this free surgery. So we have more than 40,000 Argentinians who have had this surgery, and we managed to do a very small hospital within the country. Argentina is a very big country, and those who would come from the south all the way to the north would have to travel for hours in an omnibus, and on the way back it could be dangerous because it's a simple surgery, but it's still people are fragile afterwards. So we tried to make a small medical unit, fully free services, to start giving this service to Argentinians within their country, educating several Argentinian ophthalmologists to do it, and they would have a Cuban advisor. And we have managed to give this surgery to 5,000 Argentinians within Argentina, but the best is that it's called Ernesto Che Guevara. That's the name of the hospital in Córdoba, Argentina.
I heard you speak at the Latin American conference in London at the TUC in November, and you made the point that everything in Cuba is not perfect. And on the same day, the interim ambassador of Cuba in London made the point that there are changes coming in Cuba, but that those changes are for a better socialism, not a transformation back to capitalism. Tell us, if you will, some of the problems that still remain in Cuba and what kind of changes we can expect in the coming months and years.
The first problem that we have in Cuba is the blockade imposed to us by the USA for more than 50 years. It is very easy to talk about the blockade, but it's extremely difficult to live it. It's a situation that is extremely difficult for the Cuban people. I always give very simple examples. A little baby, 8 months old, a little girl, she had a bleeding in her intestines, and the specific medication that she needed, unfortunately, has a patent in the USA. So nobody gives Cuba this medication. If the USA finds a company who is selling this to Cuba, they can receive a fine of $5 to $10 million, or they can forbid for the products of this particular company to be sold in the USA. So obviously it is extremely difficult to find a company who will sell this medication. Sometimes we need 5 or 6 intermediaries in order for the FBI not to detect where the drugs are coming from, and this means it's extremely expensive for Cuba to get these drugs. This would be one of the main problems that we have. If the blockade stops today, tomorrow the Cuban economy will flourish immediately. We spend thousands and thousands of millions of dollars because of the blockade. Internally, Cuba is a country that has been learning how to go ahead, how to go forward. We learn from our mistakes. We're not perfect. We're men, we're women, and therefore we commit mistakes. We've earned the right to rectify our own mistakes, and we have to do it ourselves. Nobody else can do it for us. We listen to opinions, especially if they come from friends of Cuba. Of course, we will take those opinions into account. There are problems with urban transport. It's very bad, extremely bad. We also have a lot of housing issues. This is a very big problem for us. And we've achieved a lot in the last few years, but we still haven't done enough. We have to keep going, especially for the campesinos living in the countryside. We have to improve the life of the campesinos, peasant farmers, who at times live in conditions that are very bad. So we have to find a solution for this. And we also have problems because we live in today's world. We don't live in another planet. So there is an economic crisis affecting everyone, and it is affecting us as well. At a certain point, the Cuban government realized that 500,000 people were working, receiving a salary, without producing anything. And this is unviable in economic terms. So at the time, these 500,000 people would have to lose their jobs. But how do you do this in a socialist system? How can you leave a worker without work? So we had to find alternative solutions, and those that we found at the time were to make these people who would end up without their state jobs to do something by themselves. But this is also a risk for the Cuban society, because when people start to think only about their own pockets, sometimes they forget that they live in a different society where education is free, health is free. Sometimes they can forget these things. And this is a big issue that we have to face. And this is what we've been doing lately, to think more about how to create cooperatives and not about individuals. But you cannot force people to form cooperatives. You have to make them understand, you have to make them accept, and then they can put it into practice.
Socialism in the 21st century is a new challenge, and we'll talk more about that after the break. Welcome back to Sputnik. We are talking with Dr. Aleida Guevara, one of the new figures in the Cuban Revolution, traveling the world, talking about Cuba's achievements, but also not afraid to discuss Cuba's problems, as we were doing in the first half. Dr. Aleida, welcome back to Sputnik. I, as you can see, am a very big collector of photographs and other memorabilia connected to your father, Comandante Che Guevara, and I wanted to go through some of these pictures with you, because there are some questions arise of interest out of all of them, I hope. Let's look at this one first, which of course depicts two of the great leaders, including the Comandante and Jefe Fidel, with your father, Comandante Che. I wonder if you often think about the coincidence, the kismet, destiny of their meeting. If they had not met, everything in the Cuba and everything in the world actually would be rather different. They met more or less by chance. And the relationship between them is one of the great pairings in history. There are not many other such examples. What do you remember as a child, and what have you learned in the rest of your life about the relationship between your father and Fidel?
Hace algún tiempo
some time
yo
ago,
tuve que hacer el prólogo de un libro de mi
had
papá,
to write a prologue
que
for
fue
a book
en la
about my
época que él
father,
estuvo en Congo.
about the
Así
time when
que
he
me
was in
fui a ver
Congo.
a mi tío
So I
Fidel,
went to see
porque
my
desde
uncle
que
Fidel,
nací,
because since the
Fidel es
moment I
mi
was
tío.
born, Fidel has been my
Entonces
uncle.
fui a ver a tío
So I went to see my
y
uncle.
me senté con él
I
para
sat down with
preguntarle
him
por
and
qué
I
el
asked
Congo.
him, why Congo? Why
Él
the Congo?
fue
And
muy claro, me
he
explicó
gave me a
muchas
very
cosas.
clear explanation,
Ya
a
terminando la
lengthy explanation,
conversación,
and
yo le
towards the
digo,
end of the
tío,
conversation, I
cuéntame,
asked him,
alguna
I
de
said
esas
to
cosas
him,
que la gente
Uncle,
dicen
tell
que
me, some people are
tú y
saying
papi
things
discutían,
about you and
¿no?
my father,
Me
you
dijo,
having
bueno,
disagreements,
¿cuándo caímos presos
discussions.
en
I said,
México?
when we were he said to
Yo
me,
di
when we
la
were
orden
prisoners
de que
in
nadie
Mexico,
podía
I
decir
gave
su
this order. I said,
afiliación
don't
política.
say what your
¿Qué crees
political
que hizo tu
affiliation
papá?
is. What did you think your
No
father do?
solamente
Not
dijo que
only
era
did he say he
comunista,
was a
sino
communist,
que se
he
puso a
also
discutir con el
started
esbirro
a
de la
lengthy
cárcel
discussion
sobre la
with the
personalidad de
henchman
Stalin.
in the prison about
Resultado,
Stalin's
a todos
personality.
nosotros
The
nos
result,
dejaron
we were
libres
all
excepto a tu
freed
papá.
except for your father.
Cuando fui a
When I
reclamarle
went
y había
to
incumplido una
tell
orden
him,
directa
but
que
you
yo había
went
dado,
against my
me di
direct
cuenta que tu
orders, I
papá
realized that
no
your
podía
father
mentir.
couldn't
No,
lie.
no
He
podía.
couldn't. He simply couldn't
Entonces,
lie.
la discusión
So
murió antes de
the
empezar,
discussion was
porque
over
¿qué iba a
before it
discutir con
started.
él?
What could I
Lo
discuss with
único que
him?
tuve que hacer
The only thing
fue
that I have
trabajar
to
un
do
poco más
was
para
work a
sacarlo
bit
de la
harder to
cárcel.
take him out of prison.
Pero eso realmente
So
marcó
I think that this is something
la
that
amistad indisoluble
was
entre
really
ellos dos.
important in this
Porque mi papá lo recordó
such
siempre.
relationship
Y a
between
partir de
them.
ese momento,
This is something my
respetó
father
mucho más a
always
Fidel
remembered,
como
and from
jefe
that point
militar.
onwards, he
Porque
always
Fidel
respected
respondía por
Fidel
cada
as a
uno de sus
military
hombres.
commander because
Fue
he always
algo
responded
que los
for
unió
each one of
para
his men.
siempre.
And this is
Esa
something
misma
that
noche
united them
que yo estoy
forever.
conversando
That
con
evening,
Fidel,
when I was talking
de
to
pronto me empiezo a
Fidel,
sonreír
I started to
y él me
smile,
pregunta,
and he asked
¿de qué
me,
te estás
what
riendo?
are you laughing about?
Digo,
Why are you
tío,
smiling?
no
And I
te
said,
das
Uncle,
cuenta,
you
pero estás
haven't
hablando de mi
realized,
papá
but
en
you are talking
presente.
about my
Es como
father
si mi
in the
papá
present
fuera a
tense,
entrar por
as
esa
if he was
puerta.
about to come
Él
by
me
the
miró
door.
muy seriamente
And
y
he
me
looked at
dijo,
me very
no,
seriously. He said,
tu
no,
papá está
your
presente.
father is present.
Well, I once asked Fidel, does he think about Che? He said that Che is often in his dreams, and he's not dead in the dreams, that he is still alive in these dreams long after he was dead. It's a very complicated but a very beautiful answer, and in a way you have just confirmed it.
Claro, y es que
Yes,
él,
of course.
igual que mi papá
Because
también,
Fidel, like my
no aceptaban
father,
la muerte de los
did not
compañeros.
accept
Les es muy
the death of their
aceptarla.
companions.
Y
It's
sobre
very
todo
difficult to
cuando
accept
estos
something like that,
compañeros
especially
han
when
significado
these
tanto
people
uno
have
con el
signified so much
otro.
for
Son
each
vidas muy
other.
lindas que se
So
mezclan,
it's
al punto
very
que cuando
wonderful lives that
yo tuve, por
come
ejemplo,
together.
mi hija mayor,
When my eldest daughter
fue
was
cesárea,
born, she
y
was
cuando abrí
born
los
through
ojos
a
de la
cesarean section,
anestesia,
and when I opened my eyes
al
after
lado mío
the
estaba
anesthetic,
Ramiro
next
Valdés
to
y
me I
Oscar
had
Fernández
Ramiro
Melo.
Valdés and
Estaban
Oscar
vestidos
Fernández
los
Melo.
dos con bata
They were
de
both
salón de
there
operación.
with their
Yo los
as
miré
if
y
they'd been
dije,
in the surgery
"¿Ustedes
room,
qué hacen
and I
aquí?"
looked at them and I said,
Y
what
los
are
dos
you
me
doing
miraron
there?
y me
And they both
dijeron,
looked at me
"Como
and they
tu papá
said,
no está,
your
estamos
father is
nosotros."
not here, that's why
Al
we
otro
are
día,
here.
mi
And
tío
the
fue a
following
verme,
day, my
mi
uncle
tío
went to
Fidel,
see me, my uncle Fidel,
y
and
discutió conmigo por el nombre de
he
mi hija.
discussed with
Él
me
quería
the
ponerle
name
el
of
nombre.
my daughter.
Yo
He
le
wanted
dije, los
to
abuelos
give
no
her
tienen
her
ese
name, and
derecho,
I
son
said,
los
but
padres.
grandparents don't
Pero
have
bueno,
that
se
right.
molestó
It's
mucho
parents.
conmigo
He was very
ese día
upset
porque
that
yo
day
había hecho un
because
compromiso
I
antes con
had
el padre de
made
la niña
a
y no podía
commitment with the
fallar.
father of
Entonces
my
tuve que
daughter,
poner
and
el
I
nombre
couldn't
que el papá
go
había
against it.
elegido.
So I had to give her the
Y
name
el
that
padre no estaba
her
en Cuba
father
para
had
discutirlo
chosen,
con él,
and the
si
father
no se los
wasn't in
hubiera
Cuba to discuss
dejado,
with
¿no? Pero
Fidel, or they could have
tuve que
discussed
asumir la
it amongst themselves.
responsabilidad
I
y
had
mi
to
tío se molestó.
assume this
Cuando
responsibility, and my uncle was quite
unos
upset
años
about it.
después me
And a few
divorcié,
years later,
mi tío me
I
llamó
got
enseguida,
divorced.
cómo yo me
My uncle
sentía,
called
cómo
me
yo estaba.
immediately. How are you
Y
feeling?
estábamos
How are you?
hablando y él
We were
escuchó que
talking,
mi hija
and
mayor
he could
estaba hablando
hear that
también
my
un poco.
eldest
Y él
daughter
me dijo,
was
"La niña está
saying
ahí."
something,
Digo,
and he
"Sí."
said to me, "Is the
La niña
the
del nombre
child there?"
feo
And
me dice
I said
porque
yes, and he said to me, the one with the ugly name. name, because he never accepted this name that was given to my daughter. And I said to him, yes, she's here. He said, I want to speak to her, put her on the phone. And I said, Fanny, come, your uncle Fidel wants to speak to you. He listened to me. He said, no, I'm not his uncle, I'm his grandfather. I said, Fanny, your grandfather Fidel wants to speak to you. Would you like to speak to him? She says, yes. And they started to have a conversation. And the following day, I went to school to collect my daughter. And when I arrived, the teacher from this group said to me, listen to me, there is a problem. I've told your daughter that children only have 2 grandfathers, but she says to me, she insists she has 3 of them, and there is no way of changing her mind. And I said to her, listen, the thing is, she spoke to Fidel yesterday, and it was her grandfather, and she said, okay, she has 3 grandfathers then, that's fine. End of story.
Let me ask you the question that every person watching this will have in their mind. Your father was one of the greatest human beings who ever lived. He is a hero to hundreds of millions, maybe billions of people. What's it like being the daughter of such a man?
I have had a great privilege of having a wonderful mother, and this woman who loved my father so much always said to us that we will get many things because we were the children of Che Guevara. But we needed to learn to let that go, to be very firm on this earth and let this go by, these things that we haven't earned by our own effort. And this was amazing for us. It is true that a lot of people love us because simply we are the children of this man they adore. Nonetheless, we learned the lesson very well, and the things that we haven't earned ourselves as human beings, we let them through. And we've lived very well, quietly, with a lot of honor, because we are the children of this man and this woman. But I've always said the following: it's not important to be the daughter of one person or someone else, but it is very nice to know that your mother and father have loved each other so much that you are the fruit of this union, and this makes of you a wonderful person. But at the same time, I've been very fortunate because I have lived and I've been educated in Cuba with this joy of life that we have in Cuba, with this courage, this strength. I love very much my people, and I feel very proud to be Cuban. And in that sense, there was this commitment every day, being the daughter of my people with dignity, because I owe so much to them. Maybe I need 2 lives to do it in order to repay all the love I've received.
Not only did you learn that lesson well, I lived in the same apartment block as your brother Camilo, and I asked him that question, and he gave me a very similar answer. So your mother taught you both very well. I just want to ask, I've only got time to ask you one more question, and I'm asking you it as a doctor. Fidel told me many years ago to stop smoking cigars. In fact, he was angry when he learned that I had disobeyed this order and I was still smoking cigars. He said, we need you more than we need your money for the tobacco. Your father was a very big cigar smoker, and this image is completely inseparable from him. Did he smoke in the house around the children?
Yes, he did smoke at home, but not when we were there, not when we were present. I don't remember, but it's true that I lived with him for a very short time, but I don't remember him smoking in front of me. And I've always said he was still smoking because Celia and I were not old enough, or he would have stopped forever. We would have made sure we would have protected him enormously in that sense. And this is, I have to say, the only thing that we regret is not just not having our father with us, but us not being old enough to accompany him.
Dr. Aleida Guevara, thank you very much indeed. Che definitely lives amongst us. What a remarkable woman, what a moving story. We hope you enjoyed the interview, and whether you celebrate it or not, that you have a wonderful Christmas.
Remember to stay in touch with us on Twitter at RT_Sputnik or on Facebook on Sputnik on Russia Today. Merry Christmas from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvelous.